When I set out to explore how gender impacted identity development in young adult literature, I had a very difficult time finding texts that focused exclusively on gender norms. In young adult literature, gender norms were coupled with gender identity and sexuality. I could not find a book in which the main character questioning gender stereotypes could do so without being led to question his or her sexual orientation or gender identity. Such is the strength of gender norms. So though I did not set out to explore transgendered youth or homosexuality, I found it was impossible to not do so when studying gender in young adult novels. Fortunately, I feel that this dilemma led to a richer reading experience and greater learning for myself. In the end, I chose 5 novels that focused on gender in relation to sexuality and identity. The titles are Parrotfish by Ellen Whitlinger, Cycler by Lauren McLaughlin, Brooklyn Burning by Steve Brezanoff, Sister Mischief by Laura Good, and Pink by Lily Wilkinson. Though each of these texts did its best to dispel and deconstruct gender stereotypes and ideologies, most of them did so by reinforcing hierarchical and dichotomous thinking. A common theme was, I am better than you because, and the examples would be, I'm more open-minded, evolved, intelligent, educated, androgynous, etc., etc. One exception to these texts was Brooklyn Burning. In Brooklyn Burning, the genders of the 2 central characters were left completely unknown, and so the reader was forced to grapple with his or her own concepts of gender and to question his or her comfort level with ambiguity. I'm going to begin this presentation with a brief summary of each novel, followed by an examination of how each novel portrayed gender and sexuality in relation to identity formation. I will close with a critique of these novels' reinforcements of hierarchical and dichotomous thinking, and explore how Brooklyn Burning avoided this trap. When I set out to explore how gender impacted identity development in young adult literature, I had a very difficult time finding texts that focused exclusively on gender norms. In young adult literature, gender norms were coupled with gender identity and sexuality. I could not find a book in which the main character questioning gender stereotypes could do so without being led to question his or her sexual orientation or gender identity. Such is the strength of gender norms. So though I did not set out to explore transgendered youth or homosexuality, I found it was impossible to not do so when studying gender in young adult novels. Fortunately, I feel that this dilemma led to a richer reading experience and greater learning for myself. In the end, I chose 5 novels that focused on gender in relation to sexuality and identity. The titles are Parrotfish by Ellen Whitlinger, Cycler by Lauren McLaughlin, Brooklyn Burning by Steve Brezanoff, Sister Mischief by Laura Good, and Pink by Lily Wilkinson. Though each of these texts did its best to dispel and deconstruct gender stereotypes and ideologies, most of them did so by reinforcing hierarchical and dichotomous thinking. A common theme was, I am better than you because, and the examples would be, I'm more open-minded, evolved, intelligent, educated, androgynous, etc., etc. One exception to these texts was Brooklyn Burning. In Brooklyn Burning, the genders of the 2 central characters were left completely unknown, and so the reader was forced to grapple with his or her own concepts of gender and to question his or her comfort level with ambiguity. I'm going to begin this presentation with a brief summary of each novel, followed by an examination of how each novel portrayed gender and sexuality in relation to identity formation. I will close with a critique of these novels' reinforcements of hierarchical and dichotomous thinking, and explore how Brooklyn Burning avoided this trap. In Hae-Soon Jun's book, Social Justice, Multicultural Counseling and Practice Beyond the Conventional Approach, the author describes the problem with inappropriate hierarchical and dichotomous thinking. An example of hierarchical thinking would be, I am better than her because I am beautiful, or he is worse than me because he is so stupid. Dichotomous thinking is an either-or mindset, so if you are raised to believe that being gay is bad, then you cannot be gay and be good. With dichotomous thinking, there is no ambiguity. One is either right, wrong, black, or white. Parrotfish is a story about Angela, also known as Grady. Grady is a junior at Buxton High School. The book opens with Angela telling her parents that she feels like she is really a boy, in addition to dressing like a boy, now wants them and everyone else to start addressing her as one. Her new name is Grady. She chooses this name because it is androgynous and she likes that it sounds like gray. Within her immediate family, the women have a harder time accepting this news than do the men in her family, a fact that Grady comments on in the book. Grady wonders if this is because the females may feel deserted. Her mother feels like she is losing her daughter, whereas her father claims that he always kind of thought Angela/Grady was a son. Her best friend Eve rejects her initially, while an acquaintance and later close friend Sebastian helps her to see that she doesn't have to buy into what the world thinks of her. Grady silently wishes that in switching genders she does not have to give up her entire past. Parrotfish questions the importance of gender as an identifier throughout the book. When Grady's cousin is born, she comments on how the first and seemingly most important piece of information that is communicated is his sex. It's a boy! Before realizing that she was really a boy, Grady first came out as a lesbian. This admission was well tolerated by her friends and family, but lesbians are expected to not give up their femininity. Mira's cousin is a lesbian and still wears makeup and looks like a normal person, her sister exclaims. Being female is construed as something that is not a choice, but a biologically determined truth, and with it comes the responsibility of looking and acting like a female through dress, makeup, mannerisms, activities, and whatnot. The stoplight parrotfish is used as a way to give biological precedence to being transgendered, though this is powerful and perhaps reaffirming for Grady to know that nature has examples of animals that change their sex and gender. It does reinforce the assumption that gender is a biological construct, whereas others would argue that identity politics are socially constructed. Gender is highlighted in obvious ways: dress, conduct, sexuality, language, etc., but it is also associated with a mindset in subtler ways. For example, when Grady decides to approach a handful of teachers and the principal to request that she be called Grady, the teachers who are accepting go by the title of Ms. The teachers who are stubborn or dismissive have either a Mrs. or Mr. title. The assumption here, though unspoken, is that young and/or unmarried women will be more accepting, whereas married and/or older women and men, especially men in power like the principal, will not be. Which leads to identity. Parrotfish supports the idea that gender is essential to one's identity. If you don't know what your gender is, you will be miserable. If you cannot express your true gender, you will be miserable. If your true gender is opposite of your biological sex, you will be miserable and deemed a social outcast. If your biological sex and gender match but you behave in ways that defy gender, you will need to question your sexual identity and/or be subjected to questioning by your peers. As Grady deals with all the adversities she must face on her path toward becoming her true self, she begins to see how she has gendered her world. For example, toward the end of the book, her mother is sick with the flu and cannot prepare the holiday meal. It is left to Grady and her dad to take over. Her mom traditionally does all of the cooking and preparation. Grady's dad doesn't even know how to set the table, and Grady has no idea how to cook a turkey. This incident leads her to give her mother the gift of nights off from cooking by promising that every family member will take turns learning the non-gender specific ritual of preparing the evening meal. She realizes that she has historically rejected tasks that were feminine. Though didactic at many points throughout the novel, Parrotfish is still an engaging story and educational. Cycler is a story about Jill and Jack. I was attracted to this novel due to its creative approach to gender. In Cycler, Jill is a 17-year-old senior who physically morphs into a male, Jack, for 4 days every month. It is her version of PMS. Though this book has a funny and entertaining feel to it, it is loaded with metaphors. Jill is quote-unquote all-girl. She is into fashion, she is studious in school, she has a crush on a mysterious boy, she wears thongs to bed. She is so all-girl that what little bit of masculinity lives in her is so repressed that it has to actually physically manifest in order to get any freedom of expression. Jack is a walking stereotype of all that is masculine and sexual. Jack is obsessed with porn, he is dirty and greasy, he swears, he is lewd, and he is defiant. He is Jill's alter ego, the Hyde to her Jekyll, the id to her ego. In order to keep this transformation a secret, Jill and her mother let Jill's school believe that she gets monthly blood transfusions for some unknown condition. Even Jill's best friend, Rami, is unaware of Jill's monthly change. Gender roles are very pronounced in this novel. Some of the characters are unconventionally female, like Rami, who is beautiful, intelligent, and creative and socially acceptable, yet also sexually aggressive, non-conforming, and at times radical in her socio-political leanings. She is a likable character. However, physically she's described in a manner that I find supportive of unhealthy beauty ideals that may promote poor body image and eating disorders. When you look at the slide in front of you, the image to the left of the woman with the band around her top is about the same size and weight as how the character Rami is described. She's described as 5 foot 10 inches fat-free body with D cups, and also 5'10" and 118 pounds. I've included this image just so that you could have a sense of what that might look like. According to height and weight charts found on the MetLife website, the normal weight range for a woman of her height would be 132 to 173 pounds. So she's between 14 and 55 pounds underweight depending on the size of her frame. Jill's mother is portrayed as a controlling, status-seeking, manipulative, and emasculating woman. She is, according to Roberta Seelinger-Treitz, quite common. Another dreadful parent in young adult literature. She is a career woman, drives a Saab, and is verbally abusive to her husband, and seems to have complete control over her daughter in a way that is almost consensual. When Jill asks her mother for porn for Jack, her mother's response is, "Loan him your father's. He's got a stack of Hustlers hidden in a box downstairs." And all boys do it. They're only a baby step away from chimps. Jill thinks to herself, I think she enjoys assuming the worst about Jack. About all men, actually. Jill's father is a former corporate lawyer turned yoga recluse. He lives in the basement, says little, dresses slovenly, and appears to have handed the role of everything over to his wife. He is frequently portrayed as useless or as a non-entity, though toward the end of the novel he plays an essential role in freeing Jack. Whereas Jill's dad is relegated to the basement, Jack is held captive in Jill's room for fear of what he might do if he were let free. Whether done so intentionally or not, Cycler repeatedly pits masculine traits against feminine traits in a hierarchical and dichotomous fashion. When Jack tries to run to Rami's house and notices how out of shape Jill's body is, he wonders if the reason she gave up all the sports she used to play is due to the change, meaning his emergence that started when she turned 14. He says, "Maybe when I woke up, she slotted all of her masculine traits into my week. How deeply unenlightened of her." Here the assumption is that physical activity is a masculine trait, and in order to maintain her daisiness, she gave up sports. Other gender differences pitted against each other include cleanliness, hairiness, libido, complacency, and vanity. Jill's greatest humiliation in this book is when Jack retaliates by hacking off her hair. Jack's biggest frustration is losing his freedom and being kept from his love interest, Rami. Not only are the genders constantly contrasted, they are rated. Cleanliness is good and identified as feminine. Dirtiness is bad and recognized as masculine. Libido is masculine and also bad. Hairiness is bad and that's masculine. Physicality is masculine, but that's good. Vanity, which is feminine, is bad. This novel may work well in the classroom to discuss gender and sexuality, but it will be important to point out how even though gender stereotypes are being challenged, they are still being reinforced and rated hierarchically and dichotomously. Brooklyn Burning is a love story. Kid is our main character and he falls in love with Scout. At no point in the novel is the gender of either youth revealed. We know that both characters are young, skinny, temporarily homeless, lost, and confused. But beyond that, they are faceless and sexless. They are street kids with a deep love for music who are growing up fast. When the story begins, Kid is in mourning over the death of his or her boyfriend Felix, a heroin addict and talented musician. She meets Scout, who is responding to a flyer Kid and Felix made over a year ago in search of a musician. Kid is homeless after his or her father kicks him or her out of the apartment for staying out to all hours, coming home drunk when at all, and burning down a goddamn warehouse. And then there's this. I've got the only kid I know who doesn't know whether to be straight or gay or a girl or a boy or what. This is the most thoroughly gender-free book I have ever read, and I found it liberating once I got used to it. Even the instances where someone was identified as a girl or a boy or a boyfriend, it was not clear as to whether or not the gender identity matched the sexual anatomy of the person. All of the characters were sexually ambiguous, gay, bi, or otherwise. There was no explicit sex in the book anywhere, although the subject matter was heavy, including prostitution, drugs, and promiscuity. Physical descriptions were extremely gender ambiguous. For example, "You look like a pixie sometimes," or an elf. And the other one is, this was the year she took clippers to the back of her head. Boy in the back, girl in the front. Unlike the other novels I chose, Brooklyn Burning isn't so much a search for identity as it is a search for love and belonging. Kid wants his or her mother back. He or she wants Scout to love him or her. He or she sees the hypocrisy in the world and names it. And I quote, I made Dad uncomfortable, virgin or not, just like Coney made her folks uncomfortable. Bringing Ace home, girls home, whoever, what difference did it make? Coney liked to fuck. Kicking her out just said, not here. It didn't say, not at all. As for me, who knows? Maybe it would have helped if I brought someone home so my parents would be able to put me in a box, check a mark on the census form. Kids' struggle is with who people think he or she is, and less with who he or she thinks he or she is. The reader should be left wondering why he or she is hated or rejected and left feeling so badly about his or herself, just because he or she isn't easily defined. Though Kid's gender is never named, I feel that his or her experience is one summed up by Annis Pratt as quoted in Trites. Quote, the hero does not choose a life to one side of society after conscious deliberation on the subject. Rather, she is radically alienated by genderal norms from the very onset. This is from Trites, page 12. Lastly, I think the main reason that Brooklyn Burning was able to escape the traps of hierarchical and dichotomous thinking was by refusing to feed into gender stereotypes or stereotypical means of describing gender. As Trites expresses in Disturbing the Universe, gender is generally defined by physical appearances. Brooklyn avoids all physical descriptions that one could affix a gender label to, and the author never shares the gender of our two main protagonists. The other reason I believe is due to the fact that the story takes place outside of the school. There are no cliques to contend with, only frustrated parents and musically inclined junkies. Sister Mischief is a book about Esme, a 16-year-old Jewish girl who is gay and who loves hip-hop music. She and her band of friends, tall, butch, strong, and straight Marcy, Rowie, the Indian, smart, beautiful, and searching, and Tess, God-loving, wealthy, fair, beautiful, and smart, joined together to form the group Sister Mischief. They rap about women's rights, equality for all, and sister power in a Midwestern town and in a school that has officially banned all hip-hop music and language or clothing associated with music. Esme finds herself strongly attracted to her friend Rowie, and the two become a secret couple for 2 months until Rowie admits that she's not sure she is quote-unquote all gay and ends the relationship. Unlike many young adult novels that involve sex, the physicality between Rowie and Esme is very natural and anxiety-free. They seem to enjoy each other's bodies without the typical fear portrayed in young adult novels. This book was fairly ambitious and did its best to bring together friends from many different backgrounds and leanings. Through their friendship, religion, race, sexual orientation, women's rights, censorship, and many other topics are discussed, and the text does a pretty good job of balancing gender strengths. For example, Esme's dad is a sensitive, loving, domestically inclined father who is not gay. Marcy's dad is a coach who is as hard as tacks, but he supports his daughter and doesn't put her down for being strong. The dads in this book are portrayed fairly. Esme's search for identity is realized through understanding her sexual orientation and through sending her first letter to her mother, who left her and her dad when Esme was 5 years old. Both Esme and Marcy were raised without mothers. Esme's left and Marcy's died when she was 2 years old. As they are quoted saying, "We missed the same lessons on how girls were supposed to be." At the onset of the novel, Esme is uncertain of her sexuality. She ends up sleeping with a male classmate in the back of his car, and during their lovemaking, it becomes abundantly clear to Esme that she is indeed gay. Her gayness causes her less social strife than might be expected due to the fact that her orientation is only known by a few close friends. Since she is feminine and pretty in appearance, she is acceptable, unlike her friend Marcy, who everyone assumes is gay because she is butch, meaning big and strong. And Esme is quoted as saying, "It's not fair to pick on Marcy for a secret she's not keeping. It makes me feel guilty." So being strong is seen as such a masculine trait that your orientation is assumed. You are gay if you are strong, if you're a strong woman, and gay if you're a weak male. And gender is definitely primarily a physical appearance, is definitely defined by physical appearance. Pink is a story about Ava. Ava is the daughter of progressive parents who would prefer to see her wear black versus pink. They love her girlfriend Chloe and are shocked when Ava decides she wants to transfer to a private prep school. Though Ava tells her parents and her girlfriend that the change is strictly for academic reasons, the true reason is that Ava wants to try on a new identity. So Ava makes the switch and begins experimenting with pink sweaters, kissing boys, and hanging out with the stage crew, the Screws, and the popular kids, the Pastels. There are no innocents in Pink. Nearly every character plays a role in hating someone. Chloe hates dumb, unimaginative people, the Screws hate the Pastels hate the Screws, and Ava lies to all of them about who she is and what she wants. Ava likens herself to Emma and sees her role eventually as the one who needs to keep the peace and repair rifts. All ends well, but nothing is the same. In Pink, hierarchical and dichotomous thinking runs rampant. Everyone thinks they are better than or worse than everyone else. Everyone feels like they need to fit into a certain box and do so perfectly. This book represents high school at its worst. Chloe, the enlightened lesbian, hates any place once it is known, preferring to have all of her haunts and interests be unique and known only to her in a select crowd. The Screws think that they are better than the Pastels and the actors. The actors are portrayed as 3-year-olds who need constant attention. The Pastels think the Screws are complete losers. Mind you, they all attend the same high-end, progressive educational facility where portfolios are used and students and teachers work together to set goals. Reinforced stereotypes for females in young adult novels are evident in Pink as well. For example, a quote from the book, "You just have to figure out who you are and learn to love that, but I can't do that and be what everyone wants me to be." Ava struggles with a desire to experience all that a typical teenager would experience, while trying to stay true to her parents' desires to see her free from all forms of misogyny. Though it would be easy to see her escape to Pink as a simple way to just fit in, for Ava it's an opportunity to feel the power of her sexuality, her intellect, and the freedom from various forms of self-expression. At various points she does admit that escaping her box is easier for her since all it requires is a change of schools, whereas one of her friends who is Asian will always appear Asian and gets labeled in that box, despite his wanting to escape it. Overall, I found this book to be highly entertaining. It did point out some good gender differences, but as I said earlier, the dichotomous and hierarchical thinking was just unavoidable. All of these young adult novels challenged the status quo in regards to gender and sexual orientation. They were all subversive, even though some were more didactic than others. There was not a lot of racial diversity in the text, but class-wise there was. As I read them, I tried to imagine how I would use them in a counselor's office. In the end, I was most inspired by the possibility of using these texts, or texts like these, as aids for narrative therapy. Narrative therapy attempts to address the imbalance between society's expectations and the reality of the client's experiences. In the same manner that our knowledge of history and science continue to evolve, a person's concept of their past salient events and incumbent meaning can also evolve. I see many parallels between narrative therapy's ability to deconstruct a person's narrative and critical multicultural analysis' ability to deconstruct texts. I think by teaching students how to perform CMA for fictional characters, they can transfer the analytical skills they use to deconstruct their own stories.